What's happening, everybody? On today's show, we are going to have our yearly conversation with SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. We'll talk everything with him from conference expansion to the 9-game schedule possibility to playoff expansion and much more. Also, College Gameday announces their week 1 destination, and could we be in for a surprise at quarterback at Auburn? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, got plenty to jump into. Let's do it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And we start with news that came out yesterday as College Gameday announced they are officially heading to Charlotte for week 1 to be on location for the South Carolina-North Carolina game on September 2nd. ESPN chose to go to Charlotte over other potential week 1 matchups like Ohio State, Indiana, West Virginia, Penn State. Florida State, LSU is one of the biggest week 1 matchups, but that's going to be played on Sunday, September 3rd at night. So wouldn't make much sense to do game day on Saturday from there. So North Carolina, South Carolina, both last played in 2021 in Charlotte in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, where Shane Beamer got a nice win for the Gamecocks, winning 38-21. But big expectations for the Gamecocks this year. We just talked with Spencer Radler on the show last week. We mentioned that game. It's going to be hyped up because of the 2 big quarterbacks. Drake May at North Carolina is a guy that's garnered a lot of attention, and some circles, people thinking he will be a first-round pick next year in the draft. And Spencer Radler will get to go up against him. And, Spencer Radler can outplay him. That would be a huge feather in his cap moving forward. But North Carolina, 35-20-4 all-time against South Carolina. And will be fun. Of course, David Pollack will be absent from the game day crew as he was let go a couple weeks ago, but familiar face will be on set for College Gameday. ESPN confirming Lee Corso at 87 years old will be on set that day and will take part in College Gameday this season. So good to have the old ball coach Lee Corso in there with Kirk Herbstreit and Reese Davis and company. But nonetheless, they will be at an SEC game in week 1, College Gameday. So it'll be fun to see that. All right, another SEC news, Joe Milton obviously got some big shoes to fill this year, succeeding Hendon Hooker there, and he is garnering a lot of respect. SEC Network analyst Jordan Rogers saying recently that Joe Milton is hands down the most talented quarterback in the entire country, and it's not even close. I told you guys I was out there at the Manning Passing Academy a few weeks ago, and he just flicks his wrist, and that thing goes 80 yards. And a big thing with him was putting touch on the ball. It sounds like he's doing that. He's been doing that this offseason, working with Heupel and company. So Joe Milton could be looking for a huge year. Was very good in that Orange Bowl. Took over late in the year when Hendon Hooker went out. But Jordan Rogers saying Joe Milton, hands down the most talented quarterback in the entire country. That is high praise for him. All right, Paul Feinbaum, he was on Jocks FM on Monday, recapping SEC Media Days. One of the things he was asked about was the Alabama quarterback race. And there is a consensus that maybe Ty Simpson is closing in on being the guy. Feinbaum said, I found that to be a very positive thing for Alabama because I was somewhat nonplussed with what I've seen from Jalen Milroe and completely unsold on Tyler Buckner. Started feeling a little bit better. Being around Coach Saban on Wednesday last week, you can't read too much into him. But what I read was a quiet confidence, especially with the unwavering praise of Tommy Rees. He said, it just meant to me Alabama deserved to be the pick in the West, and quite frankly, I think the Tide is in for a very good year. As for LSU, Paul Feinbaum said he had no problem with LSU being picked second in the West. He said he just wonders if they have enough, especially since that Alabama game is in Tuscaloosa this year. Lastly, Feinbaum was asked about Vanderbilt receiving 8 first-place votes from the media last week. He said, look, I appreciate what Media Days is, but when I see that, I really begin to wonder about people's right to vote. I know that sounds crazy because I'm always a big believer in democracy, but democracy has nothing to do with being qualified to vote for the SEC. If you vote for Vanderbilt to win the conference, you don't deserve to be credentialed because that proves that you're just making a mockery out of something that we take very seriously. So there was Feinbaum sharing his thoughts following Media Days. Over at Auburn, a lot of folks believing that Peyton Thorne is going to be the guy, the former Michigan State quarterback, coming into Auburn this offseason after Hugh Freeze and company didn't like what they saw out of Robbie Ashford and Holden Garner in the spring. But one betting website has released their odds for the college football week 1 starting quarterbacks. And right now they've got Robbie Ashford as the slight favorite over Peyton Thorne. They've got Robbie Ashford at minus 140 to be the Auburn week 1 starting quarterback. They have Peyton Thorne at plus 100. So not dramatic odds, but pretty significant that they have Robbie Ashford as the favorite right now to be the week 1 starter. I think most people, if you'd asked them in recent weeks, they would have all said Peyton Thorne is the guy coming in to start. Very interesting what's happened with the transfer portal, with guys moving around. We just assume when a guy transfers into a school that he's going to be the guy, but starting to see a couple of narratives from around the SEC and around the country where, transfer coming in isn't guaranteed to be the guy. We're seeing that at Ole Miss right now. Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State coming in. A lot of people think Jackson Dart's going to win that job. So just something to keep an eye on there with Peyton Thorne, one Vegas sports book, putting Robbie Ashford as the favorite there. A few recruiting tidbits before we get to Greg Sankey. Justin Williams, 5-star linebacker out of Conroe, Texas, announced on Monday he has chose the Georgia Bulldogs over Oregon, Alabama, and Texas. So Georgia now has verbal commitments from 3 5-stars in this class of 2024, including Dylan Raiola, Ellis Robinson, and now Justin Williams, the big linebacker. He's the number 1 linebacker in the class of 2024. He's also the number 11 overall prospect and the number 3 player from the state of Texas. Over at LSU, they picked up a commitment from 4-star linebacker Tylen Singleton. He is staying home as a Louisiana native. Number 5 player in the state of Louisiana, number 10 linebacker, and 6'1", 208 pounds. So LSU now has 19 commitments in their 2024 class. And over at Florida, one of their offensive linemen reportedly no longer with the program as part of a medical hardship within his family. Offensive tackle Keontae Goodwin, no longer with the program due to a medical circumstance. His mom lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and he reportedly determined it would be best to return closer to home to focus on his mother's care. 6'8", 340 pounds, 4-star recruit, 30th overall player in the 2022 recruiting class. Spent his freshman year at Kentucky before transferring to Florida. But a little bit of a hit to the depth on Florida's offensive line there. And there you have it. There's the latest news going on around the conference. Coming up next, our conversation with SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. First, I want to remind you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. We've been telling you this week, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories for your car, you got to head to eBay Motors. They give you the eBay guaranteed fit, and that's going to make sure that every part you need fits just right the first time around. You just add your ride to their My Garage section on their website, and then you look for the green check when you're looking for a part, and that's going to let you know if that part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors with over 122 million parts to choose from, you're going to be back in the game in no time. It is easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So go get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices only at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. ebaymotors.com. Go get up and running today. Always a pleasure to sit down with the commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey. And Greg, I think this is, it's been a lot of years I've interviewed in a row, and I always start off with the same question. I'll start off with it again. Do you ever get tired of winning?
No. It was a lot of fun in Omaha to have two SEC teams in the final series and to keep that trophy home. And then the great thing about baseball, I probably shared this when you've asked me before, you don't lose anything for like 2 months. You win. I guess mid-August is when we play soccer, so you've got this undefeated feeling for a while.
It was great. Kim Mulkey, of course, coming in, year two, winning at LSU as well, just like Jay Johnson in baseball. Of course, Georgia, Kirby does it again in football. But, we don't talk enough about the track and field and all those other sporting events as well. And it leads to success on the field, also leads to success off the field. Congrats on your contract extension. That means you must be doing something right?
You think so? It's nice to be wanted. And the presidents were very supportive of me. People have asked me, well, that's got to make you feel good. I'm like, well, it does, but it also ramps up the intensity. There's an expectation.
Yeah, what's next?
You perform. So it's a wonderful place to be. There's no place I'd rather be than in the Southeastern Conference. The opportunities ahead, the growth we're going to experience next year, but the success, 8 national championships this year across our campuses, and the opportunity for more in the future is right in front of us.
I know you're somewhat of a humble guy, but you're able to take a step back, or are you able to take a step back and acknowledge all you've done, everything from getting through COVID and saying we're going to find a safe path to playing while other people are throwing in the towel, and then the conference expansion, adding Texas and Oklahoma, the big TV deal. I mean, you have done a lot in these past couple of years.
The best way I can explain it is the college football playoff national championship game is on a Monday evening. And we've had a lot of success. We've won the last 4. We've had times where 2 SEC teams meet in that championship game. It's Monday night. It's really cool. But on Tuesday, we have men's basketball conference versus conference games in the regular season. And none of our men's basketball coaches playing on Tuesday care about the football game on Monday. So whatever successes it is, you take a moment to appreciate it, but you're going to have to turn the page because there's many more challenges ahead.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about one of the big topics of this offseason, and that was with how do we handle the scheduling moving forward. We know you guys are going to stick with the 8-game conference schedule in 2024. We'll revisit it down the road, but was it ever close to going to 9 next year? And what's the pros and cons from staying at 8?
We never took a set of votes. We had a lot of discussion and analysis and collaboration around the what's. And there are people, that favor 9, people that favor 8. But from a close standpoint, it just became, I think, the most appropriate way, the most recognized step was the 8-game schedule. And there were a lot of opinions expressed, like, how can they only play 8 games? And then 2 weeks later, when we announced our actual schedule and people looked at all 16 football team schedules, you're like, wow, that's pretty impressive what they're doing. And we're going to go without divisions in 24. That gives us the chance to have teams play more frequently than we have in the division format and have more equity in the schedule. So there's less disparity around the strength of schedule. I think all of those are wins, and those are part of the factors that were inherent in the conversation. What's really going to be key is as we move forward, we're able to protect the vast majority of substantial rivalries, games of passion, if you will, that make the heart beat a little bit faster than some others. We can't do that every year, and that's going to create the need to decide between 8 or 9 games because of the ability to facilitate a higher number of annually played games.
It is interesting. I mean, the non-conference games, you stick with 8, you have 4 non-conference games still, and the opportunity to play a big dog. In 2024, there are a ton of monster non-conference games that SEC schools are playing. I've heard this mentioned before. Is there a stipulation, or would you put a stipulation that you must play a Power 5 school every year moving forward?
We have that now.
Okay, that is
and
still.
In fact, as we were going through considerations, one of the issues that was part of our evaluation is just walking away from non-conference games with little notice. And to your point, there are some games of high-level consequence. We actually have, in Florida, they play 3 of their non-conference games all against autonomy conference members.
Right.
And so we wanted to be thoughtful. I think people are going to have to understand if we do increase to 9, that will in fact impact non-conference scheduling. There's one less game available, and we'll have to consider whether we keep the same mandate for playing a high-level non-conference game in place.
Conference expansion, obviously, you guys taking advantage. There are other conferences doing other things, and it's a topic that's not going to go away. I'm just curious your philosophy on future expansion, if that ever was. We always hear people talk about when you're considering adding a team. Is it adding more eyeballs? Is it getting into a state you're not in? Is it getting, just a blue blood, big time program? What are all the factors that go into when you consider adding a program?
I feel inadequate and unprepared to answer the question compared to some of my colleagues who are opining consistently about their desire or interest in expanding.
Sure.
But I'll do my best, if I may. We're not recruiters. I'm not on the expansion hunt. So fundamental to your question is that observation. I don't think expansion is about a number. And I've watched some colleagues speak about we want to get to a number. Some former colleagues speak to wanting to get to a number. 16 is actually a really flexible number for scheduling purposes. It's divisible by a whole lot of numbers.
Right.
And that gives you the ability to make decisions like we're making with 8 or 9, the number of annual opponents. For us, you want philosophically aligned universities that support high-level national championship competition. And our approach has been that geographic common sense is important.
Sure.
And that's unique among conferences. So you have the Big Ten from LA to New Jersey.
Yeah.
That's a decision they've made. But
it's tough.
It can work in scheduling football games, but even that's difficult. What flies under the radar screen is the Big 12 now will have games from Orlando to Provo, Utah.
Right.
Miami to Boston College. Those are trips longer than our longest trip, which is Columbia, South Carolina to Austin, Texas, which is about 95 miles further than Columbia, South Carolina to College Station. But, our marketplaces still something that are important, sure, but some of that follows if you have the right opportunities.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have some master plan. This is like the spelling rumors.
Right.
I'm not out pursuing members. I think it would be toxic were I to be the one saying that we're going to go this direction with this many schools, or we're going to go to this number. It would create a level of turmoil that I think would be highly unfair to other conferences. And what I said to our presidents in an analysis memo is, hey, I'd like everybody to stay where they are. Now, that's convenient because we moved.
Right.
But we did move, and that's a decision we made. And it would be, I think, productive and positive if people would just settle down right now, given the enormity of some of the issues we have in front of us.
Sure. And so geography playing a factor. Hawaii, I'm sorry. I don't think you're coming to the SEC anytime soon.
It was a good trip with Vanderbilt last year.
Yeah, hey, and a return trip this year. I want to ask you this question. So many institutions are driven by football. It's the straw that stirs the drink. There's a few schools that make profit off of basketball and baseball for some. Is that healthy for athletic programs to be so reliant on just the football?
Well, it's not new.
Right.
You can go back, 100 years, and you had programs where football was generating the most support. And so I think that's historic, that in the numbers and the volume that you can put into a football stadium versus a basketball arena make that true. Is it healthy? Well, you always want to develop the breadth of revenue across as many platforms so that if there's a disruption in one area, you're still able to function. And you look at what's happened in baseball in this league, the investment in facilities, the growth in attendance, and it's not nearly the scope of revenue that football experiences, but there are revenue positive aspects of some other sports. How do we grow opportunities for donors who just want to be a part of something? I mean, all of that is a continuing conversation. We're going to engage in some learning this year from some professional franchises about how they generate revenue through their facilities. I think that's really healthy for us.
Yeah, it's
I think the football dynamic is part of the reality, and that's not going to change. but how do we grow revenue in other areas is very much part of our focus.
The college football playoff, I think I remembered you saying before that 4 was enough, and I think a lot of us felt like 4 was enough, but we've expanded. We're going to 12. Did that change in your mind? Or, I mean, obviously you got to be on board with the 12, but what changed here, the dynamic, where a lot of people said 4 was fine?
So the task was for a subcommittee to look at the 26th season when the 12 years of agreements are concluded and identify a format that met some of the priorities identified. One was to access for certain the best teams. One was to provide some level entry point for conference champions. There was an expectation of growth. We would have been fine at 4. I would have gone to 8 with no automatic assurance of access, just the top 8.
That's what I've said. Yeah.
But that's not the balance that was going to be successful. People wanted conference champion.
And it's hard to get those other conferences on board without an automatic seat.
And even if you're going to give like 4 conference champion spots and an 8-game playoff, who are you going to leave out?
Right.
So I don't think the system can tolerate large gaps between a team that gets access because of a conference champion status and a team that's left out because of its success. In other words, if you're going to leave out the 8th best team in the country to take the 20th best team in the country, I don't think that's a sustainable model.
Yeah.
When we went to 12, you take 6 conference champions and then the 6 remaining best teams. Some years, those are all the top 12 teams. In other years, you'll leave team 12 at home and take team 16. I think you can survive that. That doesn't mean there won't be criticism, but it's top 6 teams after the top 6 conference champions. And so that was a bit of an elegant solution, political compromise, but one that provides opportunities I think can draw people into the game in the month of November.
Last one for you. You just mentioned so baseball ends. Do you get an off season? Do you get time to vacation?
It's really the July 4th week this week was actually really quiet, quite pleasant. The problem is I'm thinking about what do I say here on Monday, and it never leaves you.
Yeah.
The previous 4 years, 19 was media deal preparation, 20 was COVID, 21 was our expansion, 22 was the Big Ten expansion. I really didn't have a break, and that's the job. Nobody's going to weep any tears for me.
Sure, that's why you got the contract extension. Always pleasure to sit down with you, Greg Sankey, and best of luck and continued success.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for being part of SEC Media Days.
We'll have more after this. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thanks again to Greg Sankey for joining us a couple days ago at SEC Media Days. Glad we could bring that interview to you. And thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers tomorrow on the show. We all throughout the week on the show, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we got some great guests coming your way. We'll hear some more from some of our great analysts at the SEC Network. You'll hear from Tony Barnhart. You'll hear from Brad Nessler from CBS Sports as we enter the final season of the SEC on CBS. All that's coming your way later this week. You want to make sure you are checking us out at Locked On SEC. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.